أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In this video I would like to show and prove that Paul is not a serious guy and that Paul is a false apostle. First of all, when you read Galatians 1 verse 17, Paul was just talking about his conversion. So he said, after his conversion, neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again into Damascus. So the point I want to make is, if Paul was serious, he just, as he said, he just heard the voice of Christ. So what he should do if he was serious, the first thing to do is to go right away to see those apostles who was living with Christ, who know the teaching of Christ, to go to them and check the teaching, what he just heard of Christ, if it's true or false. Because he never saw Christ, he never met him. So how he can be sure that the light he saw, the guy who was talking to him, is Christ? It may be the devil. So the first thing to do is to go to his family, talk to his apostle, to check about what you heard about the teaching. But he didn't do that. He said after he heard, he went to Jerusalem. You see? Then he said 3 years later, he came to see Peter and he stayed only 2 weeks with him. You see? So for me, that's not the act of a serious guy. If he was serious, he will go right away to his family and his apostle and talk to them and see about, the teaching, ask about the life of Christ, what he was teaching, what he was saying. So, my second point is, he said 14 years after he come back. So during those 14 years, he was teaching. You see, so what he was teaching? Because he didn't come to those guys. So he said he was teaching. So after 14 years, he come back to Peter. And let's hear what he said. In Galatians 2 verse 7, he said, when they saw, he talked about the apostle, that the gospel of circumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of circumcision was unto Peter. So here we see clearly that there was two gospels. The gospel of uncircumcision, that means people don't need to be circumcised, and other stuff. Because he said the gospel of uncircumcision was committed to me. So that's the teaching of Paul, that people don't need to be circumcised. But he said the gospel of circumcision was committed unto Peter. So we see that Peter and Paul, they have two different gospels. They have their own teaching. And one of the differences is that Peter believed that people need to be circumcised, but Paul doesn't believe so. So, that's my second point, that there is a clear difference between Peter and Paul. And Paul continues in verse 11. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I will throw him to the face, because he has to be blamed. So how can you, Paul, who just came, who are the new guy, how can you say that Peter need to be blamed? Because he didn't agree with your teaching. We need to remember that Peter was the apostle. Christ himself said, Peter, I will build my, your name is Peter, I will build my church unto your testimony, something like that. So Christ himself said that Peter understand his teaching and that he will build his church on Peter. So how can you who don't have this testimony say that you know more than Peter? That Peter need to be blamed? Just think about that. How can you, the new guy, say Peter need to be blamed? That you withdraw him in the face. That means you fight him. My last point is concerning another difference between Paul and the other apostle, which is James. James, as you know, is the own family, is the brother of Christ. So if anybody knows about Christ, the love of Christ is his family. That's just common sense. So what James say? James say in James 2:17, faith by itself, if is not accompanied by action, is dead. And in James 2:24, a person is justified by what he does and not by faith alone. So for James, the brother of Christ, to have salvation, you need faith and do righteous deeds. As Islam say always, people who have faith and do righteous deeds. But what Paul say? Paul say in Romans 10:9 that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. In Galatians 2:16-21, Paul say again, a man is not justified by observing the law, but by faith in Christ. For if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. So, as we say for Paul, man is justified by faith alone. So that's a clear contradiction between Paul and the other apostle, like James right here. Because James is saying that the teaching he received from Christ is that you need faith and good deed. But Paul said no, we only need to have faith that Christ died for our sin. So that's a clear proof that Paul is a false apostle. He's having his own agenda different from what Christ teach and from what the apostle of Christ was teaching. That's why many scholars are saying that Paul is the true founder of Christianity as we have it today. Okay, this is a wake-up call for Christian. Please wake up before it's too late. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.